You don't have to agree with us to be friends with us. Anchor of the week.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Anchor of the Week, where you do not have to agree with us to be friends with us. It's Sadie and Jetson on the couch. Woo, woo, woo. We gave Courtney a week off because she's been putting in overtime.
Right
But she's here.
she still came all the way
Say
over
hey,
here.
Courtney. Hey, Courtney. Yeah, she's there. Anyway, I'm excited for today's conversation. We have a special guest with us, Sam.
Hey.
Sam, you know Jetson. Jetson knows Sam. I do not know Sam. I'm talking to you in third person,
Yeah.
which is hilarious, as if you're not here. But first of all, tell us who you are. Tell us like what you're passionate about, what you do. Just a little insight into who Sam is.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, it's very exciting to be here. I'm a big fan of the podcast, and so
Yes.
to be here on the red sofas is great. And I feel like I know you quite well because I've heard you many times over
love that.
over the sound waves. But yeah, I'm Sam, and I live here in London. I'm an artist. I'm a writer, a curator. I lead a creative community here in London as well. And I also work for a church doing marketing and design work and things like that. And I'm studying a master's degree in Art Theology at the moment as well.
Wow.
So yeah, lots of things in that kind of space of thinking about art and theology and church and how we bring those worlds together and how we can build communities that can influence the culture around us is what I'm really passionate about. But yeah, I've been in London for about 5 years now.
Okay.
And I absolutely love this city. It's always exciting, always so much on. I love that we were just talking about musicals and things. There's always so many things like that, isn't there, that you can go and see and engage with. And so it's such an exciting place to be in. So I love being able to sort of be right at the heart of that and everything that's happening there.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you said you like lead creative communities.
Yes.
What does that mean exactly? Because I feel like we have a creative community, if you will, here at the Cave, but it looks a certain way. So I'm curious what like your communities look like.
Yeah. Well, I think really when I say lead, it means that I do a lot of admin to make things happen,
Classic, yeah.
which often is what leadership looks like. But beyond that as well, there's a sense of just having a vision for what you want to do as a group of people and what you want to grow and create. And I think it's about holding that vision and recruiting people into that to build a team that can really do that. And it's about having, I think, real empathy for people and being able to identify what they need and what they want, and being able to just really support them and encourage them and really grow them to be the best artist or writer or even leaders themselves that they can be, so that you can you can build something that is ultimately relational, and from that people can really grow and flourish. And so we have a phrase that we use where we think about our community as like a spiritual habitat for creativity.
Wow.
It's like, what would it look
Okay,
like to
love that. That's a great
what it would
line.
like to plant and grow sort of habitat. So we think about plants or wildlife and nature and how they each need a sort of very unique habitat in order to flourish and to get the nutrients and the different things that they need in order to have their social groups, in order to do their full life cycle. And some of these habitats are really rare and very precious. I'm really into like nature and the environment and things. And I read a book not too long ago about rainforests in Britain. So we might not think often that there is rainforests in the UK.
I had no idea.
But actually we do have rainforests in the UK.
Wow.
So there's the tropical rainforest in like the Amazon and Africa as well that we kind of would typically know about, in Southeast Asia. And that's what we think of when we think of rainforests, and we think of parrots and tropical plants and all that kind of stuff. But in the UK we have what we call temperate rainforest. So this is like the rainforest that we get in a different sort of hemisphere of the globe. And this habitat is actually even rarer than tropical rainforest. So it covers less than 1% of the world.
Wow.
So it's really, and it's dying out significantly, but it's like tropical rainforest. It's a habitat where only certain species of plants and lichen and like liverworts and insects and even some sort of birds and things can only live. And so it's so rare and so precious, but it's something that is dying out globally.
Yeah.
And in the UK, we have some of the best and the most temperate rainforest of anywhere in the globe. So we have this real precious habitat right on our doorstep here in the UK. So I've got really into temperate rainforest.
Yeah,
as
yeah.
you can tell.
I love that.
And I love to go visit it, and it's an incredible habitat, and it's caught up as well in like our social history and our mythology as well in the UK. There's so many stories that are kind of written around it, going right back to sort of Celtic mythology and into Anglo-Saxon mythology and these things. So there's this real cultural history around these places as well, and that there's something special and different about them that kind of, that when you're there you feel maybe something even spiritual going on with these spaces, and this sense of shared memory as well. And so I think of those temperate rainforests as like the metaphor for what we want to do in terms of a creative community or a spiritual habitat for creativity, as in what would it look like to create a habitat where Christian artists and writers and designers can really sort of flourish and grow and be, where they can draw upon this like rich heritage that we have of like Christian art and writing and stuff that stretches back for millennia, and draw upon that, and also find just the simple things, the resources, the everyday needs that they need to thrive. But I think increasingly, particularly in sort of maybe like Western culture at the moment, there's less and less of these habitats for Christian artists, and so it is something that's a very rare habitat. And so it's like, how do we protect what we've got, but also how do we regenerate? So the great thing about temperate rainforests is that they do regenerate in of themselves if they're given the space to. So if you can carve out the space to, you can stop overgrazing, you can stop deforestation and things like that. They will plant their own seeds on the edge of their borders and grow and grow and grow. And so they will. So there is lots of great evidence at the moment of how like protecting these spaces and giving them space to grow can let them regenerate in themselves. And actually we can start to see temperate rainforests returning and growing again. So I think it's a similar thing with creativity. When we protect what we've got and we start with that, and we encourage people and we give them space to grow and to flourish, they themselves then plant seeds that lets the habitat grow and invites more people into it. So that is a little vision drawing upon like the whole temperate rainforest thing.
But that metaphor is beautiful, because it's not like you're trying to build something that, I don't know, like you have this idea for this community and this vision for it, but then to draw from what's already naturally, like for instance, God created the habitat and the flow of this kind of rainforest, and how you're already taking inspiration from that to then like create this spiritual habitat within the creative community.
Like you don't
absolutely
have to
beautiful.
build everything from the ground up with your own hands. You're like, what is here?
Exactly. Or even think of like, okay, how can like strategize even? Like obviously there's strategy involved, but to go, okay, how is this rainforest doing it? And how can we take from literally what God already created and then like transmit that into our culture of a creative community? It's absolutely beautiful. That's awesome.
So I wanted to ask, you said you're studying theology and art at the same time, or is it a connected degree?
They're connected. So
all right. So what's the relation? What do you think is the connection from like what you've learned to people who might not even like think that's related at all?
So it's a good question. So I think in the course we're looking at the spaces where they come into contact, art and theology, and one of those big places is like religious, what we might call now religious art, which at the time wasn't considered religious art because it was just art, and that was the forefront of art development. So we think of this stuff maybe sort of in like the late medieval period, and then going into sort of the Renaissance as well, where we're seeing this huge kind of almost eruption of culture in Europe. And a lot of that is driven by religious art. So it's creating art for devotional use, for people to use within their church spaces, within their own home spaces, in order to just help them engage with their faith and to engage with God and in prayer. And so that's one of the big areas we look at, is because so much of our art history is deeply connected to these ideas around using art as a way of connecting with God and connecting with other people in a church space or something like that. And so many of the things that happened and developments that happened in art around that time have heavily influenced even now contemporary art that we're looking at, maybe even in the Tate. I'm writing an essay at the moment about that, so I was just at the Tate the other week looking at the different art there and seeing about what traditions and what things they're lifting from like religious art and from altarpieces in particular and devotional art. Which I think a lot of the time artists aren't even aware that that's doing, but because particularly in Western culture, so much of our art history and our ideas of what art is and what it can do stem from it being used primarily as something that's devotional and liturgical. And so there's that kind of heavy link. And so we're looking at those sort of things really, as in like the function of art it has in history and how its use and its function within these sort of Christian spaces has influenced concepts and ideas of art itself. And then we're also looking down maybe more of like a theological or philosophical kind of lens of thinking about things like beauty, so the idea of beauty, what is that? What is our idea of beauty now? But heavily kind of we look going right back to the beginning. So actually this stems with like the Greeks. We're looking at Aristotle and Plato and how from that beauty, the idea of beauty is developed through like Western thought and theology, and how they've drawn upon some of these ideas that they get from the Greek philosophers, but how Christianity kind of alters that or changes that or adds to that narrative. And so there's this heavy link as well between just our ways of like seeing, our ways of being, our ways of seeking things like transcendence. So there's all of these different things that we now experience often in our everyday lives, maybe in London when we go to a gallery, or even when we go to the cinema, or when we're just sort of walking there having a good coffee, and all these little moments of things that are kind of stem from these historic ideas around art, and how it's something that's deeply connected to the way that God communicates with people. Yeah.
So just to get in the mind of the haters, maybe. Yes. So say, for example, if like I feel like I've even heard this, people will go into one of these great, stunning cathedrals and like see the intricacy and like how elaborate it is and be like, well, this must have cost millions. Like, what if this was just given to the poor? Or like, and in a way, like, how is there like, how do you like answer to like the need for almost like sometimes just, I feel like Christian practicality or pragmatism of like love is just action and that's it, you know, or love is just like serving the poor and that's it. It's like, I think people in that strain of thought might not see art or beauty as like frivolous or even like hedonistic, which I don't agree with, but I think that's definitely like a train of thought a lot of people would have and think it might be like too highbrow. So it's like, for like the everyday Christian, or even maybe people who aren't Christian and like aren't thinking of things theologically, it's just like, how do we think of this in a way that like, can like add value to just the everyday person's life, or even like show what they're already taking for granted? Because even what you mentioned about like the coffee shop, the movie, things we like take for granted, that stems from ideas that we should be able to like actually enjoy beautiful things. But I think people don't think about that. They're just like, oh yeah, that's just business. They made a good business.
Definitely. I mean, you're not wrong. This has been a debate since like the dawn of time, as in like you go back throughout history, and it's been something that like, you know, the different thinkers and the church has been grappling with. There's been lots of different councils over the years that have decided on how we should be using images and art within church spaces and things like that. And we had like the Reformation, which saw a huge change in the way that art is considered and used, and one of their big concerns was about just the sheer kind of volume of wealth that goes into some of these things. And you are right, as in what we have seen throughout history is moments where there has been this element of churches kind of maybe a monastery sometimes hoarding wealth, becoming these incredibly wealthy institutions of themselves, and moving away maybe from the initial vision that was there. And also you've seen this place of art being, you know, something that's become very highbrow and used for the wealthy, I think. And so that is an issue that we have to grapple with and that we have to think about. And that is something that maybe we have inherited as well a little bit through our culture. But I think, as I said, it's like to go back to the original vision of a lot of these things. So, you know, the original vision of like a lot of these monastic practices and these monasteries that then did become in the Reformation. And so in some ways they were right that these were hoarding wealth and that they were kind of isolated places. The original vision was that these were places where they would be places of welcoming, where they'd be places of care, where there'd be places of development scientifically and artistically. And so they were places often on where people wanted to sort of separate themselves from culture a little bit, but also still be on the edge of it. And so we might often think of monasteries now as like these kind of isolated or these sort of retreat spaces, or these monks walking around kind of by themselves singing chants or something. Or as like ruins. Maybe we see lots of ruined monasteries around the place, particularly here in the UK and across Europe and stuff, and there's these sort of old, distant, sort of quiet spaces. But actually, like the monastery kind of right at the heart of the medieval period would have been a real kind of bustling centre of community and church and creativity and science and development, but also hospitality, and they were places of medicine. So a lot of monasteries were hospitals, and they'd had caring for people, caring for the sick, caring for the poor. They would be places where travellers would come and stay and find places of rest. And so they would often develop on the edge of cities or in the places at the heart of trade. And so I think there's that sense of that vision that maybe gets lost throughout time. And so it's about how do we return to the roots of these things? How do you return to actually what God's initial vision was for these things? And it's the same with art as well. And so a lot of the arguments for art we see, especially early on, is that art is something that can engage people who are illiterate. So, medieval Europe at that time, you've got a huge amount of illiterate people. They can't read Latin, they don't even understand Latin a lot of the time, which is what the church is and the language of the church is. And so the idea initially was that, if we use visual imagery, this is a way of communicating stories with people who wouldn't be able to read it or understand it. It's a way of communicating to a big group of people all at once. It's a way of engaging them within a church space, which they might struggle to engage with otherwise. And it's a way of kind of offering them that moment of beauty and transcendence that can lift them to something higher from their everyday. And so that is kind of a lot of the kind of early arguments around why art should be used in churches and what it's initially trying to do. And when you look at a lot of the early art, that is what it's doing as well. It's purposely trying to connect those people. One of my favorite things is the Lindisfarne Gospels. And so do you know about the...
I do not know about that, no.
So Lindisfarne is up in the north of England, in like Northumbria, and it was a monastery. It was a big Christian centre during the medieval period, and they would, like most monasteries, have scribes, and they'd create manuscripts with books and things like that. And they created a set of Gospels, which we now call the Lindisfarne Gospels. And this would have been a fairly normal practice for a lot of these monasteries to do. And initially, these were written out in Latin, but then they went and someone has gone through and they've translated it all into Old English. So it's actually like arguably the oldest English Bible that we have in some way. And so it's under all the Latin words they underline it with Old English, which is really cool. But what's so amazing about this is that it's been beautifully illustrated throughout with these intricate designs, these lovely title pages, really nice calligraphy, and it's absolutely stunning, beautiful book that would have cost a lot of money. But it was created by this scribe, and one of the things I love about it is there's a few little details which can highlight his vision for what he's trying to do with this beautiful artifact of trying to connect with his local people. And as I said, they wouldn't have known Latin, they wouldn't have been, there'd have been a lot of them would have been illiterate, and a lot of them as well would have been somewhat new to faith as well. And so Christianity wasn't necessarily the dominant, it was becoming a more dominant faith, but there would have been people who a lot of this was quite new to them, and they wouldn't have, as I sauld have been able to read the Bible, wouldn't have been able to engage with these scriptures. And so this would have been their point of contact, would have been this book. And so these illustrations were a way of them being able to engage with the text and see through, and also to see that it is something for them. And I think that is what good art is doing, is allowing people to feel named and to feel whole and to feel like they belong, and that faith and God is actually wanting to speak to them and is part of them. And one of the ways that this scribe, this artist, did it is throughout he uses lots of imagery of birds. So I'm a bird watcher, so I love stuff around birds and things. But he, unlike a lot of manuscripts this time, they would have used bird imagery and things like that. But what he did was different to others, is that he purposely only depicted birds that were local to the area. So these would have been birds that people would have seen every day in the fields, and then they go to a church space and they see this huge, beautiful Bible there. They don't know what the text is, but they see birds that they've seen in the fields that day. Wow. And I just love the idea. It's like there's lots of other manuscripts that you can look at, and the artists either using birds from across Europe or often actually just making birds up. It's in like they're just doodling and making up birds, which is fun. But I think what's so nice is that he was very detailed and wanted to depict things that he would see outside his window, so that the people in his area would be able to connect with it. And the other beautiful thing that they did, I mean, there's so many wonderful things about this manuscript trying to connect with people, but the cover itself was made using metalwork. So it's got this beautiful metal, or at the time it had this beautiful metal cover with elaborate metalwork and jewellery work, and it's absolutely stunning. And again, some people will be like, oh, that's, you're putting a lot of money and wealth into this cover. And that is true to an extent. And there is something to consider about that. But at the same time, the reason behind that and the vision behind that was that this area in Northumbria was known for its metalwork. It was known for its elaborate pieces of metalwork and jewellery work. And so this was an identity of the community, that they were proud of their output as metal workers, and they would also, if this would be something, they would know what good metal work is, they would know what good metal work is and how it's valued, how it's appreciated. And so to see that in a cover of something would immediately be like, one, this is for us, like that is our identity as a community there on the cover of these gospels, so this is something for us to engage with, this is something that we want to connect with, but also this is something of value, like they would identify that this is something of value, that this is something that they want to hold and it's precious to them. And so I think that when you come to that question about art, is I think it's true that over time we sometimes lost that vision, and it has become maybe a place of wealth, or failing to hold true to that initial vision of a lot of what art is trying to do, particularly with God's vision for art, which is about how do you allow it to be something that connects with people, lets people feel named, feel whole, that connects with their identity, that lets them feel like this is something they belong to. And so ultimately it's an invitation into a place to meet with God and community, rather than distancing them from it.
Well, it's kind of amazing because, like you said earlier, it's also like devotional in the sense of this beautiful gospel kind of bridged the gap of, okay, it was a devotion, like the art and the creativity was a devotion to God in a way, but at the same time using it to like connect with the people and to bring them in. Like I feel like if anything, that's the epitome of what like proper art should be, you know, is an act of devotion, but also an act of empathy and connection with one another. So that's beautiful. Yeah.
I also just like that the phrase of like, you mentioned hospitality and of like creative spaces as like hospitality rather than escapism. I think really like connects with the heart. I think God wants us to have with it is to like do something that like by doing good art, you bring more relevance to the people you're trying to like talk to, you know? And I think like the pragmatism of it all has kind of like killed good Christian art in some ways, as in like, if it's not on the smallest like it gets the smallest budget, so it gets the smallest amount of like thought, you know? So it's just like it ends up being like, who is this for, you know? But the hospitality of it, I think, because I always try to think like evangelistically, it's like that's inviting people into something rather than like it being a place of escape. And I think especially like with the kingdom of God, it always seems like a bit of an like opposite to what the world is doing with it. So it's just like where the world and like maybe the wealthy and the elite have like used art and beauty to like isolate themselves as superior, as their place of escape, or as their place to like move a bunch of money. Maybe it was actually supposed to be what's supposed to like connect the like least of these, if that makes sense, and invite them into a bigger conversation. So it's just like, I just love how like passionate Christians can redeem every sphere from like what it has been to what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
You know,
I kind of want to, it's not really a left turn, but like kind of bringing it, I think, to like modern day Christian art. Well, first of all, like I'm curious, what kind of artist are you? Are you a creative writer, or?
I do
a lot of different things.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a creative writer. I do fiction, I do poetry, I write essays and more personal essays and stuff. I do visual art as well, so I paint, I do photography, so all sorts of things. Yeah.
Well, from your perspective then, like how do you approach your art from a place of like how do I connect with people? And now I guess, like putting in your studies and discoverings when it comes to your art theology degree, like how are you even approaching how you create with this kind of new mindset?
It's a really good question. I think there's kind of two things that I'm trying to do more of in my practice. And one is thinking, as you say, about art as something that's devotional. And by that, I don't necessarily mean that it's something that we might use in a church space necessarily, maybe sometimes, and that's I love that when that happens. But by that, seeing art and the things that I create as kind of a window to God, a window to the divine. And so that might be, but people can just see like even just a little glimmer of what that is. So sometimes it might be quite literal, as in I might literally be depicting something that is connected directly to the Bible, but sometimes it's just connecting with those themes and those characteristics and those ideas of God. And often a lot of that is around just authenticity. So it's trying to be authentic in our storytelling. And I think storytelling is the other thing. So it's that really key word of we wanting to tell stories. We want to share other people's stories. We want to share our stories. We want to share stories that the world needs to hear. I was at a Renaissance conference last year, and Joshua Luke Smith, who's an amazing poet, and spoken word artist, and he asked us this question in his talk of what is a story that the world needs to hear. And afterwards we went to the pub and we were sitting around and we all were asking this question to each other, what is a story that the world needs to hear? And I often ask myself that many times. It's like, what is a story that the world needs to hear right now?
Yeah.
What is that story? And so I think that really helps to suddenly framing your art from less of a place of what do I want to express? What do I want to say? What's this part of me, the things which I think can sometimes be slightly individualistic, but more of what's a story that those around me, that the world really needs to hear right now. And that might be a story that comes from a part of me, and it always will, because art is about that bit of self-expression. But I like to think of our creativity less as kind of like an internal looking inwards, and more of like a kind of almost tearing down of a curtain to be a little bit vulnerable and share a bit of ourselves into the world. And I think just that switch in that narrative, I think a lot of sometimes the modern ideas or contemporary ideas around the narrative artist is that it's about looking inwards, it's about internalizing, it's about almost sort of shutting yourself off and going deep down into some part of you to find something. But I think a good starting point is thinking about actually what's the world around me, what do they need to hear, and what have I got maybe that can share into that, or who is it, the story I can help tell? Is there someone that I can interview or bring alongside me, or I can support in their storytelling? Who are the people who maybe haven't got voices or spaces that I can encourage and support to kind of share their story? And that might be, and that will vary lots of times. It might be just sometimes giving them an encouraging word. It might sometimes be actually painting something for them, or interviewing them and writing up that story, or writing a poem about a conversation you had or something like that. And so I think always that, and then coming to these things with prayer and literally asking God, what is the story that you want the world to hear right now? What is the story that you want me to tell the world from your perspective, from where you're at? And I think just praying into those things and looking at that. And so so those two things, asking yourself, what is the story that the world needs to hear right now, and how can I share into that? And then also thinking about and praying about my art as a window to look at the divine, or to look at God in some way, even if it's just a little glimmer of who he is.
That's great.
Yeah.
Makes me think about,
Dope.
like, I don't know, me personally, because I love devising theater, and I like lead a devising experimental performance ensemble where it's like different performance artists that like come together to create work, and I've been doing it since like 2021, can't remember, but like that's literally like you're putting words into like I think our heart as well. But for me, it was like the first time I really loved and dove into devising theater was when I was back in the States, and I was a part of a project that was called Rethink I'm a Veteran, and it was basically a group of like female creators, so like performers, musicians, dancers, who like came together and had a story circle with a bunch of female veterans from different ages, different ranks, different I forget what it's called, branches, of the military and whatever. And we just got the chance to talk to them, and they told us their stories, and we like created a show around their stories, and like did it for them. And some of it was super abstract, some of it was very like on the nose, but it was one of those moments like after doing that show I was like, whoa, this is what I want to do, is like tell the stories of people through the means of art, which I feel like is one of the best ways to connect with people, is because I don't know, art is that kind of power, that kind of force. So yeah. Were you gonna say something, Jetty?
No, not really.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought you were ready with like,
I don't know.
Next. Yeah.
No, I just think it's great. I think, getting to talk about it is really good, because I think some people detach themselves from the conversation of art and beauty. And I think that can like isolate artists themselves in a church to just kind of feel like they need to just go off and do their own thing and just internalize themselves, and the no one understands me kind of thing. So I know this is an important conversation for a lot of people, and that art does have to do with your ability to serve and bless others, because I don't know if like creatives are like a majority of people or a minority, but I think there's that like kind of like black sheep, I'm misunderstood vibe that can happen, that can like really turn people in on themselves, and then they multiply that through their art
to an extent. I think particularly within church spaces, like particularly over maybe like the last sort of 100 years.
I think it's just the absolute pragmatism, like, you know what I mean, how that's just like become the dominant form of like church expression, and how they're, I don't know.
I also feel like I feel like we're moving out of this now, and not to generalize the church, but I feel like for so long a lot of creatives in the church were just like plugged into places and fitting into like roles that just didn't actually create a good habitat for them, maybe to like flourish and figure out what it is and how God created them as a creative. So I feel like we're moving out of that now as a church, because I think we're starting to see the need for creatives and the need to create spaces for them to actually flourish and I don't know, be more creating windows for the divine,
and
as you said.
they can actually be evangelistic and make
Exactly,
an impact on their community and like do more than just, I don't know, like just the practical things the church needs. Like it helps, but there's more.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Like you can make an impact on your culture and you can invite others into it as well.
Exactly.
Which is,
I think it's an exciting time because, as you say, I think we're starting to see that shift a little bit towards particularly like churches and Christian communities wanting to engage with culture and engage with art in a slightly different way to maybe they have before. And so I think it's an exciting time to be a Christian creator in some ways, because we're starting to see that change shift. And so I think there's still a lot more work that can be done, and there's lots of things I'd love to see happen more in church spaces. There always is, but I think you're right, we are at the start of a little shift happening there, which is really exciting. But I think that shift is stemming from, as you say, for a long time artists maybe felt misunderstood or on the edges of their church or their community, or equally maybe pulled right into the heart of it, but to create stuff, use their creativity in ways that maybe wasn't supportive of them or was street burnout from that. And so I think what we're seeing now is like a result of that is like the need that they have for other people. And so the more we're starting to see artists come together and Christian artists build these sort of community spaces to support one another, I think that is often the stem of a lot of this change that we're seeing, is that real hunger that they have. And I think there's still a lot of people out there who are in need of that, and so it's important that we keep making sure that we're open as artists ourselves and looking around at the people within our churches and our spaces who are also creative, and just reach out to them, just say, let's get a coffee, let's talk about making things, let's have some fun, because I think there's still that deep need for connection and relationship, which is what sustains people to keep going through this, because it can be hard making art and writing and creating stuff. It's not always easy, and it can be isolating if we're not careful, and so we have to be consciously choosing to connect with other people and make sure we do it with
1000%.
others.
I want to throw a buzzword out there. How do you feel about like secular art? Because and just that term, not necessarily secular, but that word and what that means. Because what you said earlier was like, even, art in the beginning was literally created as kind of a means of worship and from the church, and even how art now, even though it's not quote unquote Christian, and now we kind of have this like label on religious art, and then there's kind of like the secular art. But I know for me personally, like I will see any movie or watch anything on like, like movie, photo, video, whatever, and I'm just like, that's a word. I'm like, oh God, I see that. Like that's just like that story in the Bible. So like for me, I'm always like kind of bringing it back for some reason. But I'm curious what your take is on like, does secular art exist? What does that even mean? Like,
It's such a good question. I mean, I'm not so sure if I don't think I really identify stuff as secular art so much. Because, as I said, I think a lot of art is, it's a place of connection with people when it's good. So I think I'm more inclined to talk about
when it's
maybe
good.
maybe like exactly, maybe between like good and bad art. But that's a whole different debate, isn't it, about what makes something good art. But I think that it's a place of connection with people, right? And so I think there's an element of openness when we receive art, when we experience art, when we look at art, whether that's at a gallery or, as you say, at the cinema or something, or listen to a good piece of music, and it can connect with us. And I think God can use those moments of connection in many different ways, whether the artist is a Christian themselves or not, whether the art is trying to do something that's more of a devotional or religious activity or not. And I think in some ways all art is connecting us with that sense of otherness and wanting to lift us out maybe of our immediate experience, and either to challenge us or to comfort us, to do many different things, but it's always doing something and trying to connect with us in that way. And so I think God will often use those moments of connection and those moments of good storytelling. And because also we, as I said, we kind of inherited a lot of the kind of values of what art is from these maybe more Christian ideas, it means that there's something about art that still becomes a transcendent experience. And so I think there's that definitely at play. And so I think it's not, so I think a lot of what we might call secular art is something that we can still engage with as Christians, and we should be engaging with, and can be incredible places for people to meet with God in different ways, because ultimately art is making us be more aware of the other, it's making us be open to things, and often will give us those moments of transcendent experience. And God can use anything he wants to speak to people. And actually, if we learn one thing from the Bible when it comes to art, is that actually God repeatedly uses things that humans have made and created in order to connect with and meet with his people, which I think is something that's really powerful and interesting. And so I think that, just because the artist might not necessarily be a Christian, doesn't mean that it's not something that we can engage with or get from and enjoy or appreciate in some way. But that's not to say is that also there is some elements of art that is maybe not secular, but that could be damaging as well. And so I think that's something we have to, that that there is evil in the world, and not necessarily all art is good in that sense, as in good and evil. And I think that's something that I'm exploring a little bit and grappling with a little bit. But I think that there is sometimes when, equally as much as art can be used to lift our eyes and as a window to the divine, it can also be used as something that takes people to a place where it might be more harmful for them, and where kind of maybe some of the kind of darker side of our world is at play. And so I think whether that, some people would say, well, that's not art then, and that's a whole different question about what art is.
Or
but definitely there's these ideas around these human expressions maybe that maybe aren't so positive out there. And I think that is more key for me, is whether it's secular or religious or Christian or not, is more of like, what is it trying to do, what is it trying to say, what's that message it's trying to say, and does that message align with the character of God? Does it give me that moment of connection with God? Is this an authentic, real story that someone's sharing about their life or someone else's life? And I think, not to say that I don't think all art I think we shouldn't hide away from talking about the challenging negative things, but it's more about, is this an authentic expression of that, or is it trying to manipulate, or is it trying to reveal something else in that sense?
And I think it's cool in that sense, because in that way, talking about art and consuming it and actually being able to like discuss it is another skill and muscle in art in itself. But also, not to get like too mystical, but I think art is like super prophetic, and I think even in the Bible and the Old Testament, like any expression of like deep idolatry or like evil also took physical form, and it was in images humans would carve or make, or statues. So it's just like I think we can't understate the value of it, and the value for Christians to step in, or even just like good people to step in and like start saying something valuable with art, because like from the beginning of time, evil has taken physical expressions through art. So I think there is a call to like Christian creatives to actually like say something better, say something different, say something like more true than maybe what other like expressions are saying. But I as you were talking about that, I'm like, there's an art to actually just talking about media as well, like with our friends, like when we see something, are we just going to be like, all right, that was fun, or like, I don't know, getting to talk about it. To talk about it. I love getting to like talk about a movie right after like you exit a theater. I think some really cool conversations can like sometimes come out of that. Or even like other things.
That's so important. It's like discernment. It's like when we talk
Yeah.
about discernment in other aspects of Christian life, it's the same when we experience these art things. It's like, how would we normally discern? Well, we would think about maybe like, does this align with what God says in his word? Does this align with, well, you might talk about it with other sort of Christians or with trusted mentors or something like that. And it's a similar thing, as you say. That's why dialogue and discussion and conversation around these things is really important, because that will help us identify, that bit was really interesting, that made me feel that way. What was that doing? It's really key. And I think also what you said about almost this spiritual aspect of creativity. And I think that we also have to remember that our creativity is a spiritual act as well as anything else. And so we often talk about you putting art out into culture and connect with people and all these things, which is amazing. But it is also something that's deeply spiritual, that connects right back to the character of God, that God is a creator and we're made in his image. And so when we create, we're kind of expressing that in a really wonderful way. And so creativity is something that is powerfully about connecting us with that spiritual aspect of who God is, and through the Holy Spirit using us and working through us. And right at the beginning, we have God creating order out of chaos, and creating filling and forming the world from chaos. And so his creativity in that moment, his creation in some ways, is part of this spiritual battle. Chaos being often a word that's used for like evil, in the world. And so it's like that sense of that God is using creativity as a way of kind of doing spiritual battle as well. And I think we have to remember that when we're putting stuff out there into the world that we're creating with the Holy Spirit, it is something that's a spiritual act, both in a spiritual sense and also in a very literal sense, that we're translating that into something that's physical, that people can engage with and connect with, and themselves have a then transcendent and spiritual experience through. I also think when we're thinking about maybe trying to identify how do we know when something's maybe like good in that good and evil sense or not, one of the things I wrote about in my undergrad degree was Tolkien. He wrote Lord of the Rings, big fan. And he has a sort of, had this wonderful world like Lord of the Rings, which I'm sure we all know, Middle Earth and everything. But he also has another book called The Silmarillion, which some people might know. And at the beginning of that, he has like a creation myth, which is like how the world of Middle Earth and everything comes into being. And it's an incredible piece of writing, basically, where he has this figure called Iluvatar, who's the father of all, who's basically kind of like God in some ways. And then there's these sort of other beings called the Valar, who are kind of like demigods or angelic beings and stuff like that. And they are there at the beginning of time, before the world is formed, is sort of in the void, so to speak. And Iluvatar, he sings a song, basically. And he starts this song, which is his vision for what this world is that he's going to make.
Wow.
And he invites all the other angelic beings, the Valar, to sing with him in harmony. And they all bring their own distinct little voice, their own thing. They start to shape the vision, but they're all singing this beautiful sort of orchestral harmony. It's an orchestral image. We think of all the different instruments doing their different thing. And Iluvatar's this sort of conductor almost, who's also there singing and bringing the vision to them. And so there's this wonderful harmony going on. But then what happens is one of the Valar, Melkor, he starts to sing out of harmony and starts to sing his own thing and starts to sing a solo among all of that. And he is kind of almost like throughout the stories of Tolkien is kind of like this almost like this sort of Satan figure basically who's bringing evil to the world and falls away from being this almost this archangel sort of thing. And so there's all these parallels with our world that Tolkien's exploring with this idea of creativity and creation, and this idea that creativity is about this sort of sense of bringing our small voice to the harmony of what God's vision is and God's creation. But that actually kind of evil in some sense is this disunity with that, and it's about this kind of individualistic solo sort of piece that's happening that's out of tune and that's out of harmony with the rest of the kind of orchestra that's going on. You can imagine that in itself is slightly chaotic. And then what we see as well through the rest of the narrative, when it comes to actually when they go out into the void to actually create this world that they've been singing about, that the Valar, they're creating trees and mountains and the sea and all these beautiful things, but Melkor is actually in some ways unable to create, and so because he hasn't got this creative gift in some ways, and he's out of harmony with the vision and he's not sure what's going on. And so in the end, rather than creating, he ends up just corrupting things. And I think Tolkien draws this really wonderful image of like actually that good things are creative and created, and bad things are in a way a corruption of that created thing. And I think that is sometimes that I like to think about is like actually, okay, so maybe, all creativity is always something that's good. And when we think, then maybe that's not good or maybe that's evil, it's actually a corruption of that good or that creativity. And so I think good can create, but evil corrupts the things that good already has made.
Wow.
Word.
It's so funny, like, this podcast is called, like, if you don't agree with us, you can still be friends with us. I've literally agreed with everything you've said. I feel like you've put words into the thoughts that I've had that I'm like, oh my God, that's it. Yes. Oh man. I mean, as we're kind of like wrapping up, do you have any other questions? I don't know if you have something else.
No more questions.
But yeah, as we're wrapping up, I'm just curious, like, if you can leave the audience with, like, just one anchoring thought, maybe, about, boom, anchor sound. We need the soundboard. One anchoring thought, maybe, just about, like, creating and, being a Christian artist and everything.
Okay, well, I think, like, I guess to summarize, I think a lot of what we've been saying really is that our creativity and good creativity is something that we want to come from relationship for relationship. And so from a relationship with God and with each other. That's the place that we want to be creating from and using our creativity in, and we want to be using it as a way of building relationships with other people. So I think if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that your creativity matters, that it can make a difference, and just really encourage you to just to really embrace God and other people in your creative practice, and also embrace thinking about how your creativity and the things that you make can connect with other people and build those relationships. So to create from relationship for relationship is, that's what I'd say. I think that summarizes a lot of what we've been saying. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Amazing. Wow. Thank you, Sam. Honestly, a privilege.
Thank
Such
you.
a privilege. I feel like I have so many more
I
things
think you're
going to
write a book one day.
Bro,
Maybe.
actually,
We'll keep an eye out.
I would buy it. 1,000%. 1,000%. But yeah, thanks for taking the time, for coming out, for joining us for this amazing conversation. And thank you all for listening, for watching, whichever means you do. Don't forget to stay connected through social media. You know where to find us. You can watch us on YouTube, Spotify, all the things. And definitely get involved in the conversation. Leave a comment. Let us know what points that Sam said that stuck out to you. I feel like I can make my own list of points. I feel like I need to take notes. I feel like I should have been taking notes. Is what I'm saying.
Well, that's why it's recorded.
Hey, there we go. There we go. And I edit it, so I'll get to look at it again. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
You don't have to agree with us to be friends with us. Anchor of the Week.